Time now to look back on the F1 season. And, of course, we all know Max Verstappen won his fourth consecutive driver's title. McLaren won the Constructors' Championship, first time since the days of David Coulthard. Joining us now to look back on the season, put it in perspective, is journalist, podcaster at Autosport. It is James Allen. Hi, James.
Paul, Andy, how are you?
Yeah, we're not too bad, thanks, James. So, as you look back on it now, how good a season was it? Where does it rank?
Well, it was certainly a pretty competitive season in the end. I mean, I think when we first spoke back in March, April, it wasn't looking too promising. Red Bull and Verstappen were dominating. They got 2 1-2 finishes at the beginning of the year, and everybody was throwing their hands up in horror. But it didn't turn out that way. And pretty much from May onwards, the McLaren was the fastest car. Ferrari had their moments. Mercedes were really quick in the summer. Then they went off a bit. Then they came back again. And I think it was just a really up and down season for most teams. I think McLaren will be happy that they clinched that first constructors, like you mentioned, since 1998. They had the fastest car, so they really should have done that. And they had 2 really good drivers in Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, who both scored wins and plenty of podiums. Ferrari gave them a real run for their money. And in the end, Red Bull dropped away, partly because Sergio Perez in the second car really fell off a cliff in terms of his form. And Mercedes, as I say, were a bit spotty, so they couldn't mount the challenge. So I think it was great, and it's a record-breaking season in many ways, the longest ever season, 24 rounds, and also the first time that we've had 4 different teams win multiple Grand Prix. So a lot of really encouraging signs, and I think the fans around the world really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a much more open season. You're absolutely right. Verstappen yesterday, when he took out Piastri, I was thinking, does he think this is Lando Norris? Or would he would have
George
known?
Russell? Or you mean Lando Norris?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we weren't actually going to take Lando Norris out now because he'd beaten him.
Yeah.
Well, we should talk about Lewis Hamilton then, because it was quite emotional yesterday for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lewis says himself he completely underestimated the emotional impact of announcing he was leaving Mercedes, where he's been over 240 races with them. It's the most successful driver team partnership in the history of the sport, even more than Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. And you remember you and I spoke a lot in those years of Schumacher just winning absolutely everything, and we thought we'd never see the like of it again. And we did with Lewis and Mercedes. It's been incredible, but he felt it was time to move on. Mercedes had sort of lost their way a bit last year, and he was offered the chance to join Ferrari, maybe end his career in red, which had been a dream, I think, since he was a child. But I think the disruption of all of that, and then the second half of the season, they kind of cut him out of obviously the engineering meetings and the talk about next year's car. And you just inevitably, because everything's got to be absolutely perfect on every single point. If you just go slightly off it, and you lose a lot of ground. And I think what will worry Lewis, I think, a little bit is his performance in qualifying, because compared to his teammate George Russell, he really dropped off, and particularly in the second half of the season. His race performances are still out there with the very best of them. I don't think there's anybody who's faster over a 300-kilometre Grand Prix distance than Lewis Hamilton. But if he's going to match up with Charles Leclerc next year and not be starting behind him on the grid more often than not, he's got to find a way to unlock that single lap speed again. Yeah, obviously some lots of hugging and kissing and farewells and stuff in the Mercedes area yesterday, but I think the legacy of that partnership is there for all to see.
Next year, it would be great, wouldn't it, to have more than maybe 2 drivers duking it out, and maybe more than a couple of teams in the mix. I mean, how likely is that?
I think there will be, by the sound of it.
Yeah, I think, last time I was on, I think I kind of hinted at this a little bit, that the way I see this, and with all my experience over the years of following this sport, generally speaking, when you get to the end of a set of rules, which we are here, there's a new set of rules for 2026 that are very different. So people are going to invest a lot of their money and their resources in the 2026 design cars. So next year, I personally think that the field will close up again even more. So if we've had 4 teams winning multiple races this year, I think you'll see that, maybe that might even extend to a 5th, but for sure, those 4 teams are going to be duking it out. And all those drivers, whoever Red Bull replace Sergio Perez with, because I don't really see Perez being kept on. So they will promote somebody, could be Liam Lawson, to move up to that seat. But I think you'll see, again, 7 different race winners. And I would suspect you'll probably have maybe a 2-3-way drivers title fight. I would expect Leclerc will have something to say there. Hamilton, obviously, if he hits the ground running with Ferrari, will be strong. George Russell, if Mercedes are very confident that they've fixed their problems and they've got a good car for next year. So if he can hit his straps early on, I think Russell could have a say in it. And then, of course, Norris said on the radio at the end of the Grand Prix yesterday, next year is my year. He's going to have to learn to be a lot more ruthless. I think what I really liked about his performance yesterday is that when you referenced it there, Andy, you know, that Verstappen was a bit aggressive with his teammate at the start, which meant it was all on Norris to get the points to win that constructors title for McLaren yesterday. And that was huge, huge pressure. And he soaked that pressure up and he drove like a champion. If he can do that 24 times next year, I think he can take on Verstappen. But Verstappen's been living in his head a little bit when it comes to close combat. And he's really got to show next year Verstappen who's boss.
Yeah. And finally, do you have a favourite moment of the season, James? Standout moment?
Oh, blimey! There's been so many. I think Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix has got to be up there with the best of them. That was quite something. And I think the other one, which perhaps hints to the future, like I just referenced there, is Lando Norris really standing up to be counted yesterday. That was a really, really special moment. Zach Brown has worked so hard to get that McLaren team back into winning fashion. You know, they haven't won a drivers' championship a team's championship for 26 years. So, I mean, I think that's probably the best moment is McLaren clinching the constructors for all those men and women that work so hard at Woking.
Nice one. We will catch up with you next
James.
season, James. Thanks as always.
Happy Christmas, lads. All the very best.
Brilliant.
Greetings to all the listeners. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks very much. There's journalist, podcaster at Autosport, James Allen, reflecting on the 2024 season.
Good season.
They get 60-odd days off now, and then I think they're back into it.
You know, get well paid.
Yeah, exactly. And have a rest.
I quite like 60 days off and about
Go on,
20
then.
million a year.
You're free to go.